Alright, in this video I'm going to show you just a few things of how I use Tasker and KLWP together. On this KLWP screen I have Tasker taking care of my Wi-Fi and Bluetooth toggles. For example, my Wi-Fi is on, my Bluetooth is off, and I have sound. And I also have Tasker taking care of my sound. So let's toggle Bluetooth. Bluetooth is off, it's red. If I press it, Bluetooth should now be on because it's blue. Now I have KLWP taking care of the color, but I have Tasker taking care of the actual toggle of cutting Bluetooth on and off, and as you can see it is doing that. Something very similar would happen with Wi-Fi. If I press the Wi-Fi, it should cut off the red. As you can see, the Wi-Fi is off, and I should be able to cut it right back on, and that's Tasker taking care of the toggle. KLWP is actually taking care of the color change because Wi-Fi features are built into KLWP. However, down here for sound, notice I did have sound on. If I press this here, my sound becomes vibrate, and notice the icon did change. Basically my sound is off and I'm in just vibrate mode. And then if I press it again, it's going to take me out of vibrate mode and give me full sound back. So Tasker's taking care of one thing for these two. It's taking care of the toggles. Tasker's taking care of two things for this though. Tasker is actually doing the toggle of my sound, and it's actually allowing me to change the icon. I'm not changing the color here, I'm just changing the icon. Now I'm going to start from scratch. So if you're familiar with Tasker, and of course there's probably other ways of doing this, you probably have a more efficient way if you have experience with Tasker, but this is what works for me, and I'm going to treat this as if you were a beginner working with Tasker and KLWP. So I'm just going to create some generic task, and under vars I'm going to notice I have a %test. I tell you what, I'm going to start from scratch, so let's just create that same variable underneath vars, %test. So I have a variable, and I'm going to let this variable be on or off, but we're going to establish that when we create our task. Now let's create three tasks. One task, let's call it test off. Alright. Inside of this, for test off, just for the sake of this video, I'm going to have three things happen inside of test off. One thing, I want it to cut my Wi-Fi off. So when test off is triggered, it's going to cut off my Wi-Fi. I'm also going to have a pop-up. I want an alert from Tasker, and I want it to pop up, and I want it to say test off. And for text, I'll say Wi-Fi is off. Okay. Again, that was optional there, but I do have some text. And I'm not going to change any of this other stuff. I think it's set to timeout after 5 seconds. That's fine with me. But then I also want to establish one more thing. If my test is off, I also want my variable to be set to off. So we want to add another task. Oops, not a task, my bad. We want to do a variable, we want to set our variable, and we want to do that variable that we call test. Since our test is off, why don't we just call the variable, or why don't we just say test, set it to off. Alright, so let's just test this real quick. When we test this, it should cut our Wi-Fi off. We should see a pop-up saying test off, Wi-Fi is off, and we should be able to go back and check our variable underneath the vars in Tasker, and it should say off. Let's test that. So test off, Wi-Fi is off, that's the pop-up. My Wi-Fi should have cut off, as you can see it is, and our variable should be set to off. Let's go back and check that real quick. So underneath vars, %test is off. So we're good there. Now we pretty much want to do this again, except we want to do the opposites. We want to basically make a test on piece here. And I probably could copy and paste that. I'll tell you what, let's do that. Is it going to let me copy? Let's clone. There we go. And let's call this one test on. So basically it's the same thing inside of here, but now I want to set my Wi-Fi to on. This is going to save me a little bit of time in the video. Pop-up, we want the pop-up still to pop up, but we want to say test on, and we want to say Wi-Fi is on. And now let's set this variable, since our test is cutting back on, let's set that variable we create in Tasker, let's set it to on. So now let's test this. Our Wi-Fi is still off, so it should cut it back on. It should give us a little pop-up, and it should set our variable, which was set to off, it should set it back on. Let's see if that's going to work. Check out your pop-up. That's good. And our Wi-Fi is on because I had the notification, and as you can see, it is back on. And our variable should now be set to on. Let's go to VARs and check that out. Very good. Now, something I have found sometimes when I create this next one, this next task, we want to toggle back and forth between these two things. I'm going to exit out of Tasker, just go back to my home screen, and then I'm going to open Tasker right back up. Sometimes I get errors, and it's saying when I go to toggle, it can't find these tasks that I've created. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe somebody can chime in on that. But nonetheless, let's go in here and let's create test toggle. This is the one that we're going to be using inside of KLWP. So basically we want to do this. We want to say if, so here's how we're doing it. We're creating our test toggle. We're going to add a task, and we're going to say if our test variable is equal to on, remember we had those two names, on and off. If it's on, we want to set that variable or we want to perform a task. If our test is on, we want to cut the test off. So how do we do that? We go back to here, we want to go to task, we want to perform a task, and we want to use, so underneath our magnifying glass, if our test is on, we want to cut our test off. Alright, so if the test is on, cut the test off. What do we do if the test is not? What if this condition is not met? That's where we got to come back in here and add a task, and we want to say else. That means otherwise. I'm not going to do anything with this. Otherwise, we want to cut the test on. So if the test is on, we want to cut it off. If the test wasn't on, this is where the else is going to take care of that. So if the test is not on, we want to cut it on. And basically, this is going to allow us to toggle our tasks back and forth. So perform task, we want to cut it on if it's not on. And going back here, so if the test is on, cut the test off. Otherwise, cut the test on. Now, inside of these tests, remember, and right now, I don't think we checked that a while ago, our test is on. So if the test is on, go back to our test variable. If the test is on, if we perform this, it should cut it off. If I get an error, I'm going to exit out of Tasker and open it right back up. Let's see what happens. Okay, we're good. If the test is on, it should cut the test off. And it did. So let's go back. Let's go to VARs. Notice test is off. Back underneath task, let's go back to test toggle again. So now the test is not on, the test is off. That's what's been performed. So what we want to do now is should say if the test is on, which is not, it should perform the test on task. So let's play that. And now test on, Wi-Fi is on. And yes, the Wi-Fi is working. Whoops. And let me go back to VARs, and as you can see over here, we are good. Now, we still haven't done anything for KLWP yet. So that's where we're going to have to fix a few things. Our toggle is good. We're going to use that in KLWP, but let's go back and let's do some things over here for test on, test off. Let's do another variable for KLWP. So when the test is on, we want to cut the Wi-Fi on, we want to pop-up to come up saying this stuff. We want to set our tasker variable to on, and now let's add a plugin. And assuming you have KLWP and Tasker is up to date, you should see Kustom Live Wallpaper. And now we're creating a variable for KLWP. Now Tasker String. Tasker String is what's going to be like your on or off or something like that. Let's just say, okay, I'm going to come over here. Let's see. Custom variable, we're going to call it KLWP test. And we're going to say KLWP. No, I don't want to do it. I'm going to do something different just to get you to see how things work. Let's just say on test. I'm not trying to confuse you. I'm just trying to show you where these things are going to get used. So over here, Tasker, and this is for us to cut our test on. Tasker string is on test. the custom variable is KLWP test. Let's remember though, that's why I'm typing them over here. So we're going to set that variable. We're going to set that and it's going to send it to KLWP. So we should be good there. Don't want any timeout. I'm not messing with any of that other stuff. But basically we're going to send something to KLWP and we've called it this stuff. This is what we're going to have to be using in KLWP. Now let's go back and do something very similar for test off. Let's add a plugin for KLWP. Now what we do want to leave the same is the custom variable that we've already named KLWP test. Or I recommend doing that at least. And let's call this off test. So I'm going to add those over here. Tasker string, off test, and custom variable KLWP test. Remember, we don't want to change, I don't recommend changing the custom variable if you have these two things kind of linked together or toggling. But we do have the string, which is actually going to do some things different. So we have that, and we should be good. Everything should be good to go within Tasker. Now we have to apply this stuff to KLWP. So I'm just pressing that gear because I've always been told to, maybe to apply it, I don't know, but we're good to go here. So now let's go into KLWP. Alright, inside of KLWP, let's load a blank preset. Alright, and inside of here, I'm just, like I said, I'm starting from scratch. I'm going to add an overlap group. And inside of this overlap group, let's do a shape. Let's do a square. Let's make it big so we can see some things happen. And also, let's add some text. Now, this is where we can actually have things going on. This is where we can change some things. So, for text, obviously I need to make this black or some other color, so let's make it blue. What the heck? And let's make it a little bit bigger so we can see it. Alright, now, I'll tell you what, this overlap group, I'm going to set this to touch. So basically when I touch this overlap group, I want some stuff to happen. What's going to happen, we'll figure that out in a second. So touch, when we touch it, we want to trigger, this is where we're going to use Tasker. We want to launch a shortcut, and we want to task shortcut. And inside of Tasker, it's going to open up a little Tasker screen, and we want to toggle our test. So test toggle. That's the only thing I'm going to be using inside of here. So now we're back inside of Tasker. Press that gear to activate it. Please select an icon. Okay, whatever. Let me do a built-in icon, and I'll do, it don't matter, why am I even wasting time talking about this? Okay, there we go. Alright, now let's press the gear. So when we touch this thing, when we touch this overlap group, because remember I'm inside of my overlap group, when I touch it, I'm going to toggle my test. Now right now, we can go back and test this, and we should see those pop-ups, we should see our Wi-Fi changing and stuff like that. I haven't even used this stuff over here yet. I'm going to save that. I tell you what, let's go ahead and save this. Let's go back to our home screen. And now when I touch this thing, it should toggle. So if I touch that, check it out. Test off, Wi-Fi is off. So it should have cut my Wi-Fi off. And it did. Perfect. All right, let's touch it again. Test on, Wi-Fi is on. Now remember, that's the stuff we created in Tasker. So Tasker is, by me touching this overlap group, I'm toggling, notice the Wi-Fi is back, I'm toggling between those things that we created. Remember we did the pop-up and the Wi-Fi. Now, where are we using these things? Well, let me show you. So back in KLWP, suppose you want this thing to change colors. Suppose we want our text to change color. Okay, probably it would be a good idea to create some global variables. And if you're not familiar with global variables, here's a little lesson in global variables. Let's do color, let's do a blue for when it's on. Let me select a blue. And then let me add red for when it's off. All right. So we got our global variables. I just don't feel like memorizing these codes. That's why I'm creating a global variable. So back to items, overlap, group, and I want to change this text. That's what I want Kustom Live Wallpaper to do. But I want to do it based on these things over here. I want it to change when my test is toggled. So underneath text, for paint, I want to keep the same size and everything. But I'm going to apply a formula to my color. So we're applying a formula. Inside of this formula, here's where we're going to use these things. Now, if you scroll down to the bottom of this, you will see a BR source var. This is what we want to use. Broadcast receiver, get variables from third parties. These are the variables and stuff that we're doing. So let me click on that, and basically this is what you want to do. You can tap these right here like foobar. Of course, we didn't call our variable foobar, but basically I'm going to click that. And the thing that I do want to change is this. So inside of Tasker, the variable that we created, remember KLWP test? That's what we called that custom variable. So we're going to say KLWP test. And I'm going to do an if statement. Notice it says on test because if I'm not mistaken, my test is on. So it's working, it's communicating with Tasker. But let's do a if statement. So if, I gotta use my keyboard for that, I forget. Okay, so if Tasker KLWP test is equal to, now this is where you use these things. So if KLWP test is equal to on test, basically if our test is on, remember I want to use that blue color. So remember we got to return a color preference since I'm in my colors. Well, where do we get the global variables from in here? That's going to be right there. Global variable right there. So we want to do gvar or global variable. And what was our global variable? We called it blue, didn't we? All right. So let me get my keyboard back up. I can't use my keypad on my Mac. I don't know why. So if the test is on, let's return a global variable color of blue. Otherwise, let's return a global variable color of red. Remember we named those global variables within KLWP? And then let me add one more parentheses and we should be good to go. So right now I'm guessing that right there is the code for blue because my test is on. When we cut it off, it should be red. But this is where we're using those variables we created within Tasker to communicate with KLWP. Now notice I'm not using the percent test, I'm not using just the word on, just the word off. Those are things that I established within Tasker. We also established these things within Tasker, but this was underneath that KLWP plugin. So this is where I'm using this stuff over here, if that makes sense. All right, so let's check that, and we should be blue anyway, but let's test it out. Let's see if this is going to work. So let's save. Let's go back to our home screen, and now we're going to see a whole bunch of things happening. We touch it. Wi-Fi is off, test is off. Are we changing to red? That is the question. Yes, we did change to red. Now if I trigger it again by touching, test on, Wi-Fi is on. Is our font going to be blue? No, it's not. I wonder why. Oh, there it is. See, it's a little delayed. I was sitting there hanging out for it. So, you know, and that's the thing about it. I do notice sometimes there can be a 2 or 3 second delay. It's almost like it has to kick in. See, this right here pops up just fine, but for it to communicate with KLWP, look, it changed to red real quick. Let me do it again. Let me cut it on. It should go back to blue. Let's see if it's going to do it quick. I think it's just, there it goes. So that's not too bad, but it is happening. And it's all because of these. So there you have it. Using Tasker and KLWP. Now you can toggle Bluetooth, you can toggle Wi-Fi, you can toggle sound. Just whatever you create within Tasker, you just make sure to link it up with KLWP using your custom variable and Tasker strings. And hopefully I've showed you the reason why I did use different font or different words here is to show you what you'll actually be typing in KLWP versus what was going on inside of Tasker. Now, I'm sure there's more efficient ways of doing this, maybe, for those of you that are real experienced with Tasker and real experienced with KLWP. But I did have a request, and this is what is working for me. And like I said, there's that little delay. Maybe some of y'all know of a way to speed that up. Maybe it's just my phone. This is a Galaxy Note 4. I do have it connected to my PC. That might have something to do with it. But I still notice it when I'm out and about, leisure usage. Sometimes there's a slight delay in my triggers when I'm trying to link Tasker and KLWP. But there you have it. That's it for this video. Hope it helped.